Today on Women of Faith in Leadership, we're welcoming a woman whose story is as bold and compelling as the high-stakes world she came from. Kristine spent over 20 years navigating the intensity, pressure, and complexity of Wall Street. From glass-walled boardrooms to high-speed trading floors, she built a career in an environment where leadership, confidence, and resilience are not optional, they are survival skills. But in one of the most courageous pivots I've ever heard, Kristine traded her panoramic city views for a standing writer's desk and stepped into a completely new season, writing suspense novels set in the financial world she knows so well. She's now the author of The Lies We Trade, a fast-paced thriller releasing with Tyndale that explores the emotional tension women face balancing ambition, relationship, faith, and identity in environments that often demand everything and give a little bit back. Kristine also hosts the popular podcast We Talk Careers, where she interviews leaders from Wall Street on growth, leadership, and living out our purpose. And let me tell you, her insight into questioning, confidence, and the lies women tell themselves are powerful. She's a board member, speaker, strategic advisor, scuba diver, fiction lover, wife, mom, and a woman of deep faith who is passionate about helping women navigate calling, especially when life pulls them in many directions. This is such a rich, honest conversation, and I know that it's going to bless you. Hope you enjoy it. Do you wish that you could lead your team in a way that honors and glorifies God? Are you struggling to overcome self-doubt as a leader and have a desire to be more confident in your role? Welcome to the Women of Faith in Leadership podcast. I'm Rika, and for the last decade, I've experienced my fair share of managing challenging employees and teams in middle management leadership roles. I committed my leadership journey to God, and it changed everything. And I'm ready to share everything I've learned with you. Now, if you're ready to lead your team in a way that honors God, grab that notebook and pen, and don't forget your chai latte, and let's dive in. Welcome, Kristine, to the Women of Faith in Leadership podcast. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, and I'm really honored to be on your show. I'm a listener, and I really hope your listeners enjoy our conversation today.
I am sure that they will, because the pre-conversation was already very cool. So I can't wait to just get into it. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and then about what we're talking about today.
Great. So I'm Kristine Delano. I spent more than 2 decades navigating the world of high finance. Really think skyscrapers, spreadsheets, and way too much coffee. Recently, I swapped my office with a beautiful city view and a wonderful expense account for a standing desk in an 1850s house in Maine, on the east coast of the States. I now write suspense novels set on the world of Wall Street, and I really love exploring the messy, beautiful tension between ambition and life and love and relationships, and I love doing that on the page and sprinkling a little hope throughout.
That sounds so exciting. How did you get into writing, coming from Wall Street?
I never expected it. I used reading as a way of rewarding myself. So I'd have to read like 200 pages of very dry, performance reports and other, nonfiction work-based projects. And I would say, okay, as soon as I get through these 50 pages, I'll read 2 chapters in my great novel that I'm reading. And I went through a lot of books. And I am just a voracious reader. I think that you get to sort of explore other people's lives. You get to sort of try on different ways of thinking, different ways of finding compassion for people by learning about them through story. Jesus did it in the Bible. We read about the way that he told stories, and stories are powerful. So when I retired, I thought, okay, I'm going to sit on some boards. I'm going to do some consulting. I would love to continue to mentor younger women. And God I just took over my brain, and all I had were stories. And finally, my husband was like, just write it down. And so I started writing. I never thought I'd become a novel writer. But then I started taking some courses and I loved it. And the one that's being published really soon was my fourth novel. So I considered my first three as totally practice. Like I don't do anything without a level of excellence. So I knew that to write a thriller and to make it good, I would need to spend a lot of time at it. So that's what I have been devoting myself to for the last few years.
Oh, wow, that's so exciting. So tell us all about your thriller novel, because now I can't wait to hear.
So the novel is set on Wall Street. It's about a woman who's married. She's got a couple kids, and she comes in one day and she is forced to file a restraining order against her most trusted employee. And the stories that they're telling her about what she's done and the threats they've made against her is baffling her. And at the same time, she's on the stage at the New York Stock Exchange ringing the opening bell, and her daughter is having a crisis at school, and she is forced to have to take little pieces of her and try to solve all these sort of tensions in her life. And what we end up finding out is that the person at the core of everything is sort of the same. So um, she is a threat based on her success, and she has to find a way to navigate herself out of it.
And you literally just described every single female leader listening to the show. And even me, like I wasn't
Absolutely.
on Wall Street, but I felt like navigating the tensions of life. That
Yes.
is literally what everyone's facing on a day-to-day basis. And I bet that's what you faced as well.
Absolutely. And I think what I really wanted to get right are the power imbalances that we have all the time. Sometimes they're within us, right? Like we have the tension and the power imbalance of am I doing the right thing? Am I an imposter in my own life? Tons of self-doubt. And so we use the power against us. And sometimes it's others using their power to create situations that are really difficult to manage. And so I thought it was really fun to play with some of those power imbalances and give power to people that don't always have it and,
Mm.
find out ways in which we can, take some of that power back. So it to me it just became such a fun way to explore a lot of the stuff that maybe goes unsaid sometimes in
Mm.
our roles in leadership.
Absolutely. So you have to tell us what's the name of the book and when is it coming out?
It's called The Lies We Trade, and it is coming out January 20th.
Oh, wow, that's around the corner. So, okay, we will definitely make sure that we link all of your places where they can go and pre-order your book in the show notes because I'm even looking forward to that. I really love a good novel. And so does just tell me something. There's something I need to know. Does the underdog win? Or no, you
Not
can't say
only
that. Or does the underdog what without giving it away, is there something for the underdog in there?
I think there's hope for the
Okay.
reader throughout.
Okay,
And
cool.
so I think there are characters you're going to fall in love with. There's going to characters that are going to surprise you. So it's not always you know, people are messy, right? So there
Mm,
are people that like act a certain way and you want to believe it about them, but they're doing it in a way that protects themselves or protects something that they shouldn't. So I think there's going to be a lot of surprises in the book of what is goodness and
mm,
how it is that it's expressed in sort of corporate such situations. But I don't think you're going to be disappointed
ooh,
when
exciting.
you close the book. I'm not a person who ties up every single thing and is like, oh, at the end, they all live happily ever after.
Yeah, no.
But I am a big believer in I want someone to close the book and say, oh, I have hope and I've got some ideas and I've got
Yeah,
some like energy to like get back into
awesome.
life and tackle the stuff that's going on my own.
That's so, so, so good. And all of this really, when in preparing for this conversation today, I thought how much all of this tied into reality for us as female Christian leaders, because we, it's so good. The title of that book is so catchy, The Lies We Trade, because it's so I mean, obviously it's got meaning in terms of the fact that this woman, this lady, works on Wall Street and she rings the bell in terms of the stock exchange. But I think as a leader myself, like there's so many lies that I believed and that I
Mhm.
traded. And one of those were family time. Like I totally believe that giving up family time, trading family time
Mhm.
for my leadership and for whatever my workplace needed from me is what was needed at that point in time. And I mean, now until this day, I've still got regrets about how I traded my 8 month old, because he was only, my youngest was only 8 months old when I started in an executive leadership role. I think that I've talked about this topic so much on the show, and I will keep on talking about it. I will keep on bringing experts like yourself onto the show talking about these lies that we tell ourselves. So, what's your take on that?
I think it's why I love my title so much. It's because when you start to think about it, you start to think about how much we do trade in the lies. One of them is our voice. You know, we trade our silence for sometimes, not wanting to have conflict, or, not wanting to take the risk of speaking up, or thinking that somebody is going to think badly of us if we have a question. So those kind of lies that we're kind of trading for our ability to, stand up for ourselves and be seen as a leader. When I was a young leader, I hated to ask questions. I thought, okay, I'm just going to jot them all down, and then I'm going to go back to my desk, and then I'm going to try to find a way to know it all so that next time I go, I won't have any questions. Well, then I just have more questions next time. Finally, it was like I needed to actually see it in action. And there was this incredible president of the company that was a female, and she was amazing. And she would just ask the most pointed questions. And when I got to be in her orbit and I got to see the power of some of these questions, now some of them I knew the answer to, and I was thinking, wow, she's kind of bold to like ask something rather simple. But then there was strategy behind why she was asking it, because it set the person up for either being able to show a different side, or be able to, take the conversation in another direction. But I love that you spend time on the lies that we tell ourselves, the lies that we're willing to accept, the lies that sometimes we don't even know it's a lie until we go back to scripture, or we go back to our sharpening friends who
Mm.
tell us and have the courage to tell us that we're not operating with truth. So I think that's it's really incredible that it's something that you continue to talk about.
Mm. And I think because you talked about questions, and I think sometimes as female leaders in particular, not necessarily male leaders, but I've seen it as well, and I've experienced as well. We feel incompetent if we ask questions. We feel like, if we ask a simple, or like you said that executive leader or the president of the company, she would ask really easy questions, but what's the strategy behind that? Well,
Mm.
sometimes you need to force people back to the basics,
Mm.
because they're thinking at the top level here, but they just need to go back to the basics and think about what's going on below here. But often we feel so insecure or incompetent, right? Or if I ask that question, people's going to think, they're going to think I'm stupid. Why am I asking that question? But that's, again, it's lies we tell ourselves. It's these stories that we make up in our heads of what other people are thinking of us. And John Maxwell, I read a book of John Maxwell that says great leaders ask good leaders ask great questions.
Mm.
Yeah. And he's a firm believer in that. So I end all of and that's one of the reasons I never even shared it with the listeners, but that's one of the reasons why I end every single episode either with reflection questions or with some form of a question that people can go and answer for themselves. Because and I love that it's at the end of your novel, at the end of your book, people are going to go and have some hope, something that they want to go and do. They should be the next step for them in their mind. So I think that's such I've never heard of that before in a novel. So I'm really looking forward to that. So what were some lies that, like when you were in in a position of leadership, what were some of the lies that you were trading or telling yourself?
Mm. I think one of them is the one that I share with the main character in the book, Meredith, and that's that there's this sort of assumption that we're weaker, that because we have, families at home and we've got other people, I've got in-laws and I've got my parents and I've got family that rely on me, not just my immediate family, that I'm somehow weaker or not as effective as some of my male colleagues. And what I really love about the book when you actually kind of read it all the way through is this idea of what is resiliency, like, and how that's such a strength. And it's not just the sheer will of like getting through it every day, but it's this idea of being smarter about the way that you approach things, being smarter about the way in which you use people in your network and the way that you delegate and the way that piece together the sort of the fabric of your life. And that took me a long time because what I wanted to do is I wanted to compete for strength the same way the guys around me competed because I was one of the only females. And so in most of my career and they had sort of free game over the time of their life and I'm hoping that changes because they need time with their families too.
Mm.
But what I realized was that I needed to show the resiliency of learning and becoming smarter about the way I played the game.
Mm. Yeah, and a little bit more strategic in this, in the fact that, okay, just because I've got a family at home, it does mean that I do need to be a bit more strategic with my time. It means I need to think a little bit different than my colleagues who, whether they're male or not, don't have kids, because also I felt this big disconnect between my colleagues and I who didn't have kids.
Mm,
Again, I kind of felt sometimes it did, like you mentioned, it sometimes made me weaker because I had kids, because I had less time, or I had more responsibility that wasn't just work or just whatever. And one thing that I realized that I was doing is I sometimes um made my colleagues who didn't have kids, I tried to play them down, or like I didn't even realize I was doing it. It was only afterwards I tried to say things to them that were like, well, you don't even have kids, so how do you know, or things like that.
mm,
And it
mm,
was because I was trying to build myself up. It was this lie that I was telling, well, because I'm a parent, I know things that you don't know, things like that. And I've come across people like that in other areas as well. Like, oh well, because I used to be a lawyer, I know these things about the law that you don't. It's such common practice that we do that even with our friends. But I realized that that was something that I absolutely had to stop doing at work.
right.
And as soon as I actually stopped doing that, I felt like this sense of relief, like, okay, like it doesn't matter whether they've got kids or not. They've got different responsibilities that
Mm,
I don't have.
right.
Mm.
Right. I also think that one of the sort of lies that we tell ourselves because there's so much FOMO out there is that we have to have it all and we have to have it
Mm.
all right now.
Mm.
And this is one of the harder things, especially when I'm mentoring younger women that have a lot of hobbies, have a lot of friends, have a lot of things they're wanting to do, but they're also like, hey, I want a career like yours. I want to be able to get to this place. I want to be able to direct this part of this division of a company or whatever it is that they're trying to do. And I had to kind of reveal that there are times in my life where I had very few friends. I had very few other things that I was doing. I was raising my kids.
Mm.
I was loving on my husband. I was paying attention to the very important people in a very small concentric circle of my life, but it
Mm.
was pretty small because otherwise my job took over the rest of it. And I would look at folks, and they would be having lunch and they would be doing these things and I had to tell myself that this isn't my time and it's not forever and every once in a while I could partake in things, but I feel like sometimes we have to sort of shrink our world a little bit down to the people that need us and the tasks that need us right at the moment.
Mm. I agree, and that was me. I the second year of me being in that role, we actually my middle child was diagnosed with autism, and so
Mm,
that was a tough year for us. And I realized the value of friendship in that moment, where people at work could not necessarily be those people for me. I desperately wanted them to be my friends so that they could understand what I was going through and to empathize and to sympathize and all the things. I wanted them to cut me some slack, if I can say it like that. But I realized that, again, it was lies that I was telling myself, that now, because I've got something going on at work, at home, I've got to give more of myself at work because I don't want to look weak now that it was just this whole messy situation in
yeah.
my head. And we lost friends, unfortunately, during that period as well, because I couldn't cope. I think I just went into survival mode of like, it's my job and it's my little
Mm,
family. This is
mm,
what I can cope with at the moment, nothing else. And unfortunately, during that 5-year period, we did actually lose friends, and it's such
mm.
a shame.
It is such a shame. It is such a
Mm,
shame. But I also think that when you look back on it, God sometimes clears people, tasks, hobbies out of our way because he recognizes who needs to come into that vacuum.
mm,
Vacuums are created sometimes on purpose, I think, and it's hard in the moment, but really important if we're sort of walking with the Lord to start to realize the people that he starts to bring to us.
mm. And it's such a valid practical point that you're making, because sometimes we do forget that everything is in God's hands,
Mm,
and that He's got a plan with literally every single thing that we do. Sometimes I'm like, why did you make that decision? To myself, or to my husband and I, and then a couple of years, or maybe even months or years later, we realized, that's why we made that decision, because this is the flow on effect that it had to have. So even if you
right,
sometimes feel like you make a bad decision, it's all in God's hands. It's all in God's
right.
hands. And so, getting to basically to a practical point, to those female Christian leaders who are in that position at the moment, like what we both were in, years ago. We're not, luckily, phew, I can just say I'm not in that position at the moment anymore. But what advice would you give them? What practical steps would you give them? Any advice that you might have for those female Christian leaders who are struggling at the moment?
Uh, so much. I can base it a lot on some of the mistakes that I made. One of them was that I really focused a lot on sort of achievement, working really hard and getting really good at what I did and putting my head down and getting it done. And what I didn't do in the beginning was build a network, was
Mm,
to recognize that I needed to spend the time because it was going to be time, right? It was going to be time that wasn't to get that task done, but it was going to be the time to have a cup of coffee with somebody, the time to pick up the phone and have a conversation, the time to be introduced to someone outside of my company, but maybe doing something similar at another company so that I could, sort of exchange ideas and feed off of. Because what you recognize is that as you grow in leadership, your ability to network, your ability to find your space and find your voice amongst the others that are doing similar jobs to you is so
mm,
important. And and it really wasn't until um, an organization that I'm part of that's about 13,000 members now, but there was 20 of us that started it about 11 years ago. And I was kind of invited in with the first 20. And from that, we have grown it. And I really have seen the power of networks, the power of people that help you, create your own personal board of directors so that you can
mm,
reflect off of and you can trust these people. The folks that will, tell you, you should never go after that job. That's a toxic work culture and I
mm,
know that because I trust somebody that works there. So I think often, as especially as Christian leaders, we sometimes kind of silence ourselves and we say, well, I don't want to offend and I need to get back to the most important aspects of my job. So I'm not going to spend the time to really press into the lives of the people at work because I've got that at church or I've got that here.
Mm.
But building that network, I think, is one of the most important things you can do if you really want to take your leadership to that next level.
Mm. And was the networking group online or was it physical? Physical in the same room?
We had both. So
Okay.
my group, Women in ETFs, there was a lot of, online, but we have chapters now across the world. So we've got folks in Perth, we've got
Oh,
folks
wow.
in Singapore, we've got folks in London and Germany and a few places in Germany and, across the United States and Canada. So but it really started as just a breakfast group at one of the conferences that was in the industry. And we were a number of women that were like, hey, there's only a few of us. We should talk more. We should exchange ideas. We should encourage each other. So I think those kind of purposeful attempts to sort of create space for your ideas and others is extremely valuable.
Mm. The one thing I found valuable a lot is that if you've just got an issue or you've got this thing coming up, you just sometimes need to bounce those ideas off of somebody who understands and somebody who actually gets it. Because quite often you can't really come and do that at home because your time at home is sacred.
Mm.
Time with your family is sacred. And so you don't want to constantly come and talk at home about work all the time. Although my husband's great, I can talk to him about work all day long and he'll listen and vice versa. But that's not the point. The point is sometimes you just need somebody who understands, who can actually give you that advice. And so that's why networking is so important. I've actually got a friend in Canada who's also a podcaster. And so we're basically in the same industry. Like she also serves female serves female entrepreneurs or also female Christian leaders, but we're not in the same, like I my interest is different from hers. But because we're both setting up a business, because we're both working on similar things, I can just message her on Voxer and say, what do you think about this? Or how does this look? I want to make this change on my website. What do you think about that? It's invaluable. Like you cannot even put a price on that.
Yeah.
And so I think
And that
that's
was
the
one of the
value. Mm,
it was a big learning for me going from a career in Wall Street where my network was pretty large, wonderful people, tons of trust. And then I start writing, I think, oh, I'm going to be all alone. And I haven't had to do anything alone in a long time. It's like I always have teams. I love
mm,
teams. I love working with people. And I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to write and then, I'm not even sure if I'm going to publish it. There was just so much I didn't know. What I realized was that there was a huge writing community. And then all of a sudden, I've met these amazing Christian women who have walked alongside me. And, a couple of them, we started with nothing. And we've got, a couple of them have books that are already out coming right after me. And we're going to be published around the same time. And it's been so incredibly fun. You were saying Voxer. We're on Voxer, or we're on Zooms in the morning, or we're
mm,
doing all of this to encourage each other and also share like, hey, did you know that the publishing industry works like this? Did you know that advances are paid like this? Or did you know that? And so I feel like there's just been this huge eye opening with wow, the writing, even sometimes it's nice. I put on a Zoom, someone else is writing at the same time. We're just writing, no one's even talking, but it's just like there's this idea that you're not alone in
mm,
it.
mm,
So I think, and I thought that networking was only for certain types of jobs, and it's really opened me up to the fact that we're built for community. God created us to live in community. And no matter what we do, I think we should look to find that community.
mm. And that's so true because the very first human, Adam, God said he saw that
It's
Adam
not
was
good to be
alone, and
alone.
that's why I
You're right.
created Eve. So God, literally, we are created to be with people, with other people. And yes, some alone time is important too. But I
Mm,
think when it comes to too much alone time is then not good as well, because when it comes to your those inner deep thoughts that can really make or break you, because I've been in those low places where being alone is dangerous.
mm,
And that's when you really need those trusted people, and you can't then go and build relationships with people when you're down in the dumps or when you're in those deep
right.
dark places. It's those times of your life that you need those people that you've already built networks and already built friendships with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was at a dinner not too long ago, right outside of Boston, with a number of women that I've known for a long time. And one of them was like, she has an amazing job. She's so good at it. She's such an incredible person. She's just fun. She's a person that lights up a room when she walks in. And she's like, I'm thinking about quitting my job and doing this whole other thing where I get to work by myself and do this thing. And we're listening to the whole thing. And it's the tip of all of our tongues with like, are you crazy? Like what? And I know you had a bad day, but this is not.
Yep.
But it was like one of the other friends who was really able to reflect it back to her, speak to her as to all of who she is. Like, these are
Mm,
your strengths. This
mm,
job is this. And it was so powerful to watch it, which if she didn't have that sort of strong network of people, someone could have looked at that job and been like, well, yeah, that sounds great. Like, that's well
mm.
paying, lots of flex time. You get to work from home. You don't have to be around people. But for her, it was, exactly the wrong thing. And so
Yeah.
it was a wonderful dinner where I really got to sort of watch it in action and watch sort of the chorus of all of us being like, step away from the pier, like
So
it
good.
was great.
And that's literally what friendship, because networking becomes friendships. It's more than
Right.
just
Right.
network. It starts off as a network, and
Yes.
I've joined some local networking groups, and I must admit I've not found my place yet in some of the networking groups that I have been in, but I have found them online. So I would love to
Mm,
physically go to some networking events as well. But like I mentioned, I've not felt that I fit quite in, and it's purely because I'm a Christian. I feel
mm,
like, and I don't just want to be with Christians, definitely not, because Jesus wasn't just with Christians or with people who believed. But sometimes you just want to resonate with people. Sometimes you
yeah.
just want them to get you. You want them to understand what your mission or your vision of your business is. And sometimes they can't, because all you want to talk about is God or Jesus. And like I mentioned to
Right.
you in our
Yes.
pre-conversation, I get to talk about God and Jesus the whole day long. Yay, I love it. But I can't unfortunately do that in some of the local networking groups. But I can do that in my online networking groups, because
Yeah.
I then make sure that who I surround myself with is the people who I want to be with.
All right. Well,
Mm.
Rika, it sounds like if you're not finding an in-person networking group that does what you need to start one.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. That's a challenge for me. I'm writing that one down. Are you gonna keep me accountable on that one?
Absolutely, absolutely. I have no problem doing that. I love being an accountability partner, which is another probably good piece of advice for some of the younger leaders is to have accountability partners. So,
Yeah. And look, it's tough to have an accountability partner, because that person is going to, um, in the nicest of ways, pull you up on your flaws,
mhm,
tell you where
mhm,
you are doing things wrong, but also tell you when you are doing things right. So I never understood the importance of an accountability partner, or actually just somebody who watches you and make sure that you do the right thing, but in a good way, until I was in that executive role. And I just had the most amazing line manager, and that I could ever have had. He was a Christian man as well. A lot of my colleagues, I mean, we were 2 out of 100 or 2 out of 200, who were Christians in that workplace. But he actually showed me that the importance of leadership and how, as a leader, you are really the accountability partner of your employees, but in a nice way. Some leaders really come off as so rude or so mean or so demeaning, when they
Right.
tell people, oh, you've done this or this wrong. But as leaders, we've actually got such a beautiful opportunity to help our employees grow into, future leaders, for example.
Right.
Mm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was thinking a little bit too about, your listeners thinking about how they grow through, making sure that they are sort of the positive leader that they want to reflect in their companies or on their teams and things like that. And we get a lot of that information by watching, right? So
Mm.
we watch people, we watch shows, we probably consume a lot of sort of entertainment in that way. So I'm going to make a plea for books for a moment because what I've found, and as a writer, the most exciting part of writing for me is the interiority, being able to write down what people are thinking, like what the main character is thinking and how she's processing and how she's like seeing the world and where her faults are. She may not be
Mm.
aware, but as a reader, you're going to be like, wait, why are you thinking that way? Because she's going to say something very different from what she thinks, or she's going to act very different from what she thinks, or she's going to interpret other people's behavior. And that is a great way to sort of learn about yourself and be able to try on some of these like leadership skills that are both good and
Mm.
bad in books like mine because you really get into the psyche of someone that you're not going to be able to see when you're just watching or you're, consuming, entertainment. And that's where I think books can be so powerful because
Mm.
you get in the mind and you get to, and hopefully people take pauses and say, wow, is that how I would behave or how would I think differently? So I think it's an exciting way to find compassion for yourself.
Mm. Yeah, 100%. And it makes me think of a story that the previous guest that I had on, Dan, he said he walked into a company once and they had these big issues in the company. And so they called in all these consultants. The consultants spent a day in there and then they had to do a proposal on what's wrong with the company. And he walked into the leader, the president of the company, and he said, do you want me to tell you the truth? And she said, yes, please. He said, you're the problem.
Oh,
I
yes.
know.
I
And that
remember
took,
that episode. I
yeah,
remember because I was right
so good.
up front and it was so good.
And I think sometimes as leaders, because that makes me reflect, like literally what you just said, sometimes we are the problem, but we don't actually realize it. And that's why we need accountability partners to show out that to us. Because it's better that your accountability partner does it versus your line manager, for example.
Yes,
Because
yes,
actually at
yes.
work you can get into real big trouble
Right.
if you've tried on some of these personas or you've tried different things that other people have suggested, and then your accountability partner or even your networking group can say to you, oh, I don't think, like maybe not step up
Mm,
the pier like you just said, like back up.
right.
I don't think that's a good idea, and you can only really get that if you've got that people who you trust. And my friend in Canada, who I mentioned before, she's that person to me. Like if I do
Mm,
something in my business or if I run something or if I'm trying something out, she will be like, no, I don't think that's for you. I don't think that's a good idea,
right, right.
Rika, step away from the mouse. Don't click that button, whatever it might be.
I
um,
don't have a story quite like Dan's, but I have similar. The reason why I got into high finance, so I have a neuroscience undergrad degree.
oh,
I've got
that's
an
interesting.
engineering master's. And so I was working with companies as a consultant right out of graduate school that were really redesigning their technology systems. And I was young and I had too many teams and too much work. No excuse, but that was the case. And one of my teams was at a Wall Street firm, and I wasn't spending quite as much time as I needed to be there. But right before I walked in, one of the men who had hired our firm, he sat me down and he said, I want to tell you why you will never work for this company again.
Oh, wow.
You're
What happened?
fired. Like your team was unprofessional. They showed up late to meetings. They took personal calls at their desks. Things that had I been there, I probably would have seen, but
Mm.
I didn't. And I remember I just had no experience with failure like that before. I had never been told that I had failed. And I thought about all of the work that we could have had I done a good job and how I was going to go have to go back to my boss. All this is running through my head, like just everything, like fail, fail, fail. All I could do is apologize. Like, I am so sorry. I don't know how to make it right in the moment. That's higher than my pay grade. I'm going to have to go back to my boss. We're going to have to talk about it. What do you want to do about this presentation I'm about to give? And he's like, "Oh, you're giving it and then you're leaving." And I'm like, "Okay." So I walk into this room and I had been really struggling with how to tell them how challenged their systems were based on where they wanted to be. And so I had no inhibitions. I walked in and I was like, okay, I'm just going to tell them their baby is ugly. Like, there is a lot of stuff here that needs to happen. And I went through it and I was honest and I was straightforward and I didn't try to like sugarcoat it. And at the end of it, the CTO sat me down and started going through a list of all the projects. And we stayed there for 3 hours.
Ooh.
Like, it was a 1 hour. We had 3 additional hours of just going through all the work that needed to be done. And I kept glancing over at the guy who'd fired me, and he never said anything. So I came back with this work, went to my boss. I never told him that I got fired. And I said, this is the work that needs to be done. And we ended up with a multi-year contract, got the work done. That man and I ended up getting hired by that. That was the first Wall Street firm. I got plucked out of my consulting firm and I worked for them. He and I never spoke about it again. I was too young and inexperienced to know how to come back to him and say, hey, I would love to clear the air. So we never did. All those years working together, I'm sure he didn't forget, but I certainly didn't forget. But I
Mm.
also know what it did to me to free me up to be able to speak truth. And I think had he not done that, I might have gone in and like kind of, told them a little bit, but not everything, and tried to get the work. But instead, I gave them what they needed in order for
Mm.
them to determine that they wanted to continue to work with me. So anyway,
Mm.
that was my entry point into my Wall Street career.
Well, that's such a good story. And again, I can just see God's hand over that whole situation,
Right.
because we think that what we're going through is just so bad. It's just all of these things like, why is this happening to me? Why, God? Why?
Right. Right.
But then God's just got it all planned out. Like, I
Mhm.
would never, because I spent leadership. So my first leadership role, trying to figure it out. I think it's been about 12 or 13 years since I've been in like various leadership roles. And even if it just meant like stepping up or like being an acting role or something like that. So over a decade, that's all I know. um but all of these bad things happened to me, like especially at the beginning in some leadership roles, and I'm like, oh, leadership is 100% not for me. I will not. And I refused. Like, there was one role that I refused. I said I would never step into a director's role, because I had a director and she was not doing a great job of that, in my opinion. But I'd never been a director before, so really I did not have an opinion. um, and I just said, I vow I would never be a director. Boom, there goes my 5-year executive. I step into a director's role, and I'm like, why? Lord, why? Like, why did you do?
I
And I
think that's when
realized
God
that,
has this sense of humor. It's like, tell him, I'm never doing that. And it's like, okay, right.
sure.
But I created you and I know you.
And yeah, that 5-year executive role, or that director's role, was extremely tough. It was the toughest thing I'd ever had to do. And after 2 years, my husband was already like, no, we can't sustain this. You have to quit. And I kept on going for another 3 years. So I was in that role for 5 years until I realized, okay, this is really not sustainable. I got to get out of that. However, all the bad things that happened in that role, all the challenges that I faced, all the times that I made mistakes, because one of the biggest mistakes I made and luckily I'm very open about that, is that we were not compliant in a certain area. And my two up actually said to me, no, let's not do anything about it, like, but in my heart, I knew that it was unethical. We were not compliant. And if we didn't do that, we could face a fine. But guess what? I didn't speak up. And that was the
Mm.
biggest mistake I ever made. I should have spoken up to my two up and said, well, yes, that might be your opinion, but from a legal perspective, we should be doing this because that was my field of expertise. It was not her field of expertise, it was
Mm.
mine. And because I was the director of that area or that department. So to the and thank the Lord, we didn't end up getting that fine, but I got a wrapped, got like, I got in big trouble at
Mm.
work, but also with the authorities that oversaw our industry. And I never forgot that. And so
Yes.
that's why I'm a big believer now in that, even if it's the scariest thing you do, even if you tremble, even if your voice is shaky, you have got to speak up. You have got to speak
Yes.
up.
Yes. And I think that circles right back to the lies we tell ourselves, right? The lies we tell ourselves is that we're not powerful enough. We're
Mm,
not strong enough to do this. We're not the person.
mm,
Somebody else will take care of it. Or well, they've got perspectives that I don't, so I'm just going to trust that they know it, even though we know, like it is, it rumbles inside of us. There's tension, there's the uncomfortableness that's in there. And so I feel like the closer we can get to the Holy Spirit being able to rub on us, the more we know that those are the lies that we're telling ourselves and the
mm.
lies that we trade.
Oh yeah, and the truth of the matter was, because she was the CEO, she was the top person. I was like, well, even if I know better, even if I know from a compliance perspective, because it's my job, she's the CEO. So why would I say anything against her? If she said that, then it's going to be on her. But ultimately, it was on me because I was the
Yeah.
person. And obviously she had to have some very stern words with me about not speaking up. She's like, Rika, you have got to speak up if you
Mm,
know that what I'm saying is wrong. Just because I'm the CEO doesn't mean I know everything. I
right.
hired you for your knowledge, and that's why you
Mm.
needed to speak up in that moment.
Yes. And see,
Mm,
I think that's why stories are so important, right?
mm,
So you telling this story, the story I tell in my book, and it's so that we can protect people from, maybe having to make the same mistakes that
yeah,
that
exactly.
that we do, right? It's that idea that we can learn from each other, and that's why Jesus, spoke in parables. It's that idea that, we can start to envision how we would behave. And then when we're presented with it, there's even that more of a niggle to do the right thing. So perhaps you telling this actually, prevents somebody from having to make the same mistake.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you're in the moment, you just can't see it. I think that's the thing. It's like sometimes you get in that when you're just in that position, and even I think I could have come back after that meeting. I had ample opportunity after that meeting to go back to her and to say, look, I didn't say anything in the meeting, but this is how I feel about it.
Mm,
Or so anyway, but yeah, let this be a lesson. And I love Jesus's parables because sometimes, and what was interesting about them is that the disciples didn't always understand the lesson behind them, right? Jesus had to sometimes explain it, like to a fifth grader. That's always how I
yes.
say, like, explain this to me like I'm a fifth grader. um so yeah, I'm so looking forward to myself reading your book, but also for
Mm.
my listeners to get their hands on your book. So before we close up, is there anything else you want to add, anything else you want to say, and then I'll give you an opportunity to share where people can connect with you.
I think just that piece of, what is the advice for these younger leaders? And it really comes down to finding your voice and just and finding the confidence of being able to use it. And you do that by finding your network, finding the people that will help you get there. And I'm a real believer in speaking up for the things that you want. So even if you don't feel like you're ready for the level 2 levels ahead of you, being able to speak it to your boss and speak it to the people around you that like, I see myself there. What are the kind of things that I can be doing now to prepare myself for that? So many people kind of wait to be tapped, they're like, like no one's noticing me and no one's, it's like, who have you spoken it to? So just that encouragement that that you were created for more than maybe you see in your life right now.
Definitely. And where can people connect with you if they want to connect with you after the show?
So I'm at www.kristinedelano.com. I spell my name with a K, and so Kristine, Delano.com, and great ways to get in contact with me there. I'm also pretty active on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I am excited about my debut coming out. I have a 2-book deal with Tyndale, so I'll be having a second one come out, which is an estranged sisters book thriller, which I'm really
Ooh.
excited about too. So lots of good stuff there, available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or anywhere that you buy books.
Buy books. Well, when your book comes out again, definitely I'll have you back on again to come and chat to us
Oh,
about that.
yay.
I think this is
I can tell you all my imposter syndrome about how I deal with reviews and and
yeah.
all of that.
Oh yeah, I can just imagine. Because again, like that, we didn't even touch on imposter syndrome today, but that might be a topic for a different day because I can just imagine when you started as a writer,
Oh,
how much imposter syndrome you must have fought. So
huge,
mm,
huge every
mm.
day.
Mm.
Yes,
I'll make
yes.
sure that all your links are in the show notes for the listeners. So definitely go and connect with Kristine there. And Kristine, thank you so much. This was an amazing conversation. And I look forward to now having you in my network. So cool.
Yay, me too. Thank you so much. And thank you all out there. This has been great.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts? It would mean so much to me to read your feedback. Also, it would really bless me big if you shared this episode with a fellow leader who might benefit from hearing today's message. And remember, put on the armor of God daily and walk by faith and not by sight. I'll meet you back on Monday for another episode.